Hi guys, and happy Easter. He is risen. He is risen indeed. So today, I think it's fairly obvious that we're going to be looking at the resurrection of Jesus, and we're going to use Matthew's Gospel, chapter 28, verses 1 to 10. Dawn was breaking on the first day of the week. The Sabbath was over. Mary Magdalene and the other Mary had come to look at the tomb, when suddenly there was a great earthquake. An angel of the Lord came down from heaven. He came to the stone, rolled it away and sat down on top of it. Looking at him was like looking at lightning, and his clothes were white like snow. The guards trembled with terror at him and became like corpses themselves. "Don't be afraid," said the angel to the women. "I know you're looking for Jesus who was crucified. He isn't here. He's been raised, as he said he would be. Come and see the place where he was lying. And then go at once and tell his disciples that he's been raised from the dead and that he's going on ahead of you to Galilee. That's where you'll see him. There, I've told you." The women scurried off quickly away from the tomb in a mixture of terror and great delight, and went to tell his disciples. Suddenly, there was Jesus himself. He met them and said, "Greetings." They came up to him and took hold of his feet, prostrating themselves in front of him. "Don't be afraid," said Jesus to them. "Go and tell my brothers that they should go to Galilee. Tell them they'll see me there." Everyone above a certain age, in the Western world at least, can remember where they were when they heard that the President Kennedy had been assassinated. Many people in other parts of the world will be able to remember where they were and what they were doing at similar moments of great national and international crisis. Many of us also remember clearly the precise moment when something startling and very, very good happened to us. I have a vivid memory of the telephone call nearly 30 years ago as I write this that told me I had been appointed to my first job, a position I had set my heart on. I remember being, for once in my life, completely lost for words. The person who had called me had to repeat what he'd said before I could eventually stammer out my thanks. I remember the dry sense in my mouth as I put the telephone down and called to my wife to tell her the news. I knew that from that moment on my life was going to be different. A whole new world was opening up right in front of me. It isn't difficult to understand the mixture of terror and delight that gripped the women who had gone to the tomb that morning. Mark and Luke explain that they had brought spices, since the burial had taken place in too much of a hurry before the start of the Sabbath on Friday evening, to wrap the body in the proper way. Matthew simply says that they had come back to look at the tomb. At that point in the story, they seem simply to be mourners, just wanting to be there, near Jesus, to pour out their sorrows in as much peace and quiet as possible. Peace and quiet was the last thing they got. Matthew's graveside scene is easily the most dramatic of the four. An earthquake and angels, the guards stunned into a swoon, and messages about Jesus going on ahead to Galilee. Some think, of course, that Matthew has added some of these details to make things appear more spectacular. You must just as well say, though, that the others missed them out, because if you're telling a story like this around the world, you don't want people to laugh at the details and then think that they've dismissed the event itself. For Matthew, standing within a long Jewish tradition in which angels tended to appear at great moments within God's purpose, this wasn't a problem. The point, of course, is that what is happening is the action of God himself. The God who remained apparently silent on Good Friday is having the last word. He is answering the unspoken questions of Jesus' followers and the spoken question of Jesus himself on the cross. And what God is doing is not just an extraordinary miracle, a display of supernatural power for its own sake, or a spectacle favour to Jesus. What God is doing is starting something new, beginning the new world promised long ago, sending the disciples to Galilee in the first place, but then, as we shall see, on the ends of the earth and the close of the age with which the news of what has happened, a whole new world was being opened up in front of him. Though they were thunderstruck with amazement and fear, there is every reason to suppose that they remembered for the rest of their lives what had happened that day. The accounts of those first few moments go back to the genuine personal memory, told again and again to incredulous friends and neighbours, in the tone of voice of someone saying, "I know, I almost couldn't believe it myself. It still seems totally amazing, but this is how it was." Though the angel tells the woman that the disciples are to go to Galilee and see Jesus there, they meet him almost at once, there near the tomb. Luke simply records appearances of Jesus in Jerusalem. Matthew and John record them both in Jerusalem and Galilee. Mark's final chapter is almost certainly broken off in the 8 verses which are left. He simply has the angels instructing the women, as here, to tell the disciples to go to Galilee to see Jesus. But the crucial thing is that Jesus' resurrection is not about proving some point or offering people a new spiritual experience. It's about God's purpose that must now be fulfilled. They must see Jesus, but that seeing will be a commissioning to a new work, a new life, a new way of life, in which everything he told them before will start to come true. We cannot today meet Jesus in the way the women did that morning. Of course, it is a vital part of the Christian belief and experience that we can and should meet Jesus in spirit and get to know him as we worship him and learn from him. That personal and intimate relationship with the living Lord is central to what being a Christian means in practice. But we would be seriously misreading Matthew not to mention the other gospel writers, if we thought his story was just a vivid or coded way for describing that experience. He clearly intended to write of something that had actually happened, something that had not only changed the women's hearts, but had torn a hole in normal history. This event has changed the world forever. It announced, not as a theory, but as a fact, that God's kingdom had come, that the Son of Man had been vindicated after his suffering, and that there was dawning not just another day, another week in the history of Israel and the world, but the start of God's new age that would continue until the nations had been brought into obedience. So for reflection today, imagine being one of the women who encountered the risen Jesus at the tomb. Contemplate the mixture of amazement and fear they experienced. How would you react if you were in their shoes? How does their encounter with the resurrected Jesus inspire awe and transform their understanding of who Jesus is and what God was doing? Reflect on how Jesus' resurrection inaugurates God's kingdom and marks the beginning of a new age. How does this reality shape your understanding of the Christian faith and your role in participating in God's redemptive plan for the world? Well, thanks for watching along these past 40 days. Happy Easter. I do still have another week's worth of readings in this book that I've been using and going through over this period of time. So I'll still do that. So I think there's some quite important things in here. The Great Commission that Jesus sets his disciples out, being the light out of darkness, God's one and only Son, and Jesus as being truly human, and then Jesus being revealed. So, I shall see you on Monday. Thanks for watching.